Happy Monday, everybody, and happy lunch. I'm glad you're trying to establish some normalcy in your lives and taking a normal noon lunch. I appreciate that. There have been some weeks and days that I've worked where I forget what day it is, and I end up doing a lot of work on a Sunday, and I'm realizing that it's a weekend day, and yeah, pretty crazy time. But I'm going to share my screen and get right into it, and we're going to leave a little bit of time for questions at the very end. Before I start, this presentation is going to be a little bit of a meta presentation. So I'm going to show you how I'm presenting kind of as I'm presenting it. And something that is a brand new feature in the newest version of Microsoft Office 365. They built in a lot of web accessibility features, and primarily the largest one that I use very frequently is the subtitles feature. So underneath the kind of main menu, underneath slideshow, you can click on always use subtitles. And I'll show you what those are in a second. And then you can establish the language of your subtitles, where the microphone's coming in from. So I'm using a corded mic that I'm plugging into my laptop right now because the sound quality is best. It hears my voice the clearest. And then it'll tell you where to overlay those subtitles. And let me show you what that looks like. So when I go to present the slideshow and play from the start, everybody should see my PowerPoint screen right now. Now there's going to be a little bit of a lag because there's a little bit of a lag with the live subtitling feature, because right now the Microsoft technology is integrating with an artificial intelligence database on the internet. And that's how it's pulling all the correct words and analyzing my speech patterns. I've also dictated into Microsoft PowerPoint for hours and hours and hours. So generally my subtitling is pretty accurate. And one thing I'm going to do today throughout the entire PowerPoint presentation is keep the subtitling on. And if it's a distraction, just kind of try to ignore it. But I want to give you an idea of what you can do, especially as you're creating content for your websites or for your LMS, your learning management software, your learning management system. So what I have started doing at UT Austin, I teach part-time at UT Austin and at Texas State, and any presentations that I'm doing on PowerPoint, I record one version of it with the subtitles on, and then all of a sudden that video file has closed captioning, and that video is more ADA compliant. A lot of video technologies do not have a live captioning feature, and Microsoft worked very hard to integrate that software into the Office suite. There's also dictation now built into Microsoft Word, but make sure you have the most recent version of Office, and you should have these features built in. So I'll use this throughout the presentation. It's going to be funny. You know, there's going to be some mistakes and some misspellings. That always gets a laugh. So we'll see what the misspellings are. But I will launch right into it, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. And if you want me to demonstrate anything else, I'd be happy to do so. There's an introduction to me. I technically had my virtual graduation celebration, I believe, on Saturday. It was a pretty sour event, I will say. People are pretty down about it, but I did just graduate from UT Austin. I had kind of a double emphasis on linguistics and disability studies. So I primarily write about clarity of institutional communication and then making websites more web accessible. Published quite a few articles and presentations about ADA compliance just since 2018, because 2018 was a really important cutoff date for the reestablishment or the reauthorization in some ways of Section 508, which held institutions of higher education to a certain web compliance threshold that all schools need to follow going forward. I have access to all those articles. I will actually send Christine a zip file of this presentation and all of my articles, and you have my contact information right down there. It's just zachtaylor@trelliscompany.org. I'd be happy to talk with you further about it and help you kind of troubleshoot some problems that you're having, either teaching, learning, or just developing web content. So COVID-19 has made learning online extremely difficult for a certain cohort of students, and those are students with disabilities. Obviously, as faculty members have encountered various hurdles in getting all their content online, a lot of that content was not created in an ADA through an ADA lens and an ADA compliance lens in the first place. I remember when I was an undergraduate and I was trying to document my disability at my undergraduate institution, the paperwork was so cumbersome, it was so difficult for me to document my disability. And then there were no online materials created for me to review lecture notes, for me to review slideshows, for me to listen to the instructor deliver the lecture again. There were no additional learning materials. And now we're in an age where we have such technology and we have the ability to create supplemental learning materials and make sure everything is very ADA compliant. But in the rush of COVID-19 to get everything online as fast as possible, ADA compliance, I think, took a major backseat to the speed in which all of these processes had to happen to get the educational services delivered in a timely manner. Really, really challenging for a lot of folks, especially in this time. According to IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, a post-secondary qualified student essentially is any student with a documented disability who can get into the program. So if a student is admitted to a community college and they have a documented disability, they are a qualified student. And all post-secondary schools need to do is provide academic adjustments. So that might mean extending test taking time, or allowing a student to turn in a paper late, or something like that, some sort of academic adjustment, lowering the reading that a student has to do, but increasing maybe the video content or digital content that they have to consume to get all the course materials. And then auxiliary aids, something like having videos closed captioned, or having somebody who can sign to someone who is deaf, a deaf student in a classroom, an auxiliary aid like that. However, post-secondary schools don't have to encounter an undue burden to provide all those services. So here's where you see an explosion of ADA lawsuits and litigation, because schools have said hiring someone who can do sign language in every single lecture hall we'd go broke. We can't possibly afford that. And that's the undue burden. So then students are denied that at the post-secondary level. If you're from the K-12 system like I am, I was a high school teacher for a number of years, and I was a blended special education teacher teaching English. And FAPE is free appropriate public education, does not apply in post-secondary settings. Essentially, it ends at academic adjustments and auxiliary aids. So you can see there's a huge hurdle that students are going to encounter moving from the K-12 system to the post-secondary system in this country. So I thought to myself, how difficult would it be if I was a student with a visual disability trying to apply to a school like UT Austin, where I was from? And so this was, as of about a year ago, the Macomb School of Business landing page. It looks very simple, it looks very intuitive. Students can connect through Apply Texas on this website. It is linked, but I couldn't find it. I was in my bedroom and I had blindfolded myself, and I was using a screen reading technology in my laptop to read all the descriptions of the hyperlinks and the pictures and the alt text of the entire website, every single web element. So when I audited this page for compliance, I learned that there were a lot of ADA non-compliance WCAG errors, their web content accessibility guidelines. And essentially, I couldn't access the web page and I couldn't access Apply Texas because that web element, that search bar, didn't have any text data in it. So I was hovering my mouse or my cursor over that search bar, but it was saying empty, empty, empty. It wasn't describing what that element was. So I couldn't find anything on this website. And something as small as that, I mean, we could have typed in the metadata and in the HTML code of this page, this is the search button, search for what you need in this box, just a quick description, 2 lines. And that might have opened the doors to higher education for students exploring this website. So something as small as that, a little bit of ADA noncompliance can go a long way, unfortunately. So what is web accessibility broadly? are websites and web tools designed to be used by people with disabilities using a wide range of assistive technologies. There are technologies now that allow you to control a computer screen with your eye blinks. So you can actually right and left click on a computer screen using your eyes. There are technologies that allow you to navigate a website fully using only your mouse, using only your keyboard. They're pretty incredible, and there are hundreds of them out there. The W3 is the Worldwide Web Consortium. They published the Web Accessibility Initiative and the WCAG 2.0 standards. So these were adopted by Congress and written into ADA. So the official threshold of compliance is WCAG 2.0. That's what colleges and universities, only Title IV schools, are held to by law in ADA. It's a wide range of recommendations to make websites, PowerPoints, PDFs, Word documents, anything online, making that more accessible for those folks. And again, adopted by Congress's law. That's a screenshot of the WCAG standards. WCAG has already been updated to WCAG 2.1, because as internet technologies advance, the standards keep advancing. But it is a really robust series of standards, and it is fairly simply written, although it does take a little bit of tech savvy and computer science knowledge to understand exactly what everything is talking about. But as a practitioner or a faculty member, you don't need to be an ADA guru. You need to know enough to solve some low-level problems and to know when you can't solve it, and to run up the flagpole a little bit to the IT or the web development staff at your school. But I highly encourage you to explore that site. It's really, really robust, and it is written into ADA, so those are the official standards adopted by Congress. So a renewed emphasis on ADA has occurred several times. The Rehab Act of 1973 was a huge emphasis on ADA and kind of the emergence of equitable opportunity for people with disabilities. But then on January 18th, 2018, there was a huge re-amendment of Section 508 that essentially held Title IV institutions to level AA WCAG 2.0 compliance. And that's linked right there. Basically, anything that a college or university sends to a student or is accessible by a student or any person that serves an educational purpose has to be ADA compliant. So that's everything from a landing page, an admissions page, a housing page, to Canvas or Blackboard or D2L or any other student information system has to be ADA compliant. Why was there a renewed emphasis in 2018? Because a lot of schools were getting sued. And what's interesting is, as I have traveled the country and I've presented about this topic, I have found that a lot of institutions know about ADA compliance and web accessibility only if they've been sued because their websites were not ADA compliant. It was interesting. I was doing a speaking engagement in Worcester, Massachusetts to MASFA, which is the Massachusetts Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. That's a mouthful. And there were two campuses in that room that when I had brought up web accessibility, their hands shot up and said, we know all about that, because students had tried to apply, they couldn't access the application, they sued, they won, and the school had to pay out and compensate the student for that because they were denied an educational opportunity. So renewed emphasis for sure. And now, because of a COVID-19 environment, we're kind of thrust into this new normal, and now everything's going to be online, at least for the short time being. So how do we adjust and make sure that what we're doing is ADA compliant for students who now have no choice but to learn from home? So publishing accessible websites and student learning management systems, here are the big picture issues that as faculty members, as practitioners, you have to be aware of. Does your institution web developer understand how serious this is? Are they a web accessibility expert? Or is anyone on their staff a web accessibility expert? And if there is someone, like there was at UT Austin, can there be some professional development for faculty and staff? So having taught at Texas State for coming up on 4 years now, and then having been a public school teacher for 6 years, I didn't receive ADA web accessibility compliance training once. I never heard it mentioned once. It wasn't part of our PD whatsoever. And a really piece of like low-hanging fruit and a discussion you can have is something like, is your institution's color scheme ADA compliant? So the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill had an ADA compliance issue semi-recently because their baby blue and their white font wasn't contrastive enough and it wasn't fully ADA compliant. So they had a discussion about institutional branding, which carried over into their student learning system because their online portal was also baby blue and white. These are the big picture kind of discussions that need to happen about institutional web compliance. Can we have professional development delivered by professionals? Is there time to work with folks one-on-one to craft websites, student learning materials that are ADA compliant? Is there that willingness to take a step back, be a little patient, and create things really robustly and ADA compliant instead of quickly? Also know who can upload documents to your LMS. So how many chefs are in the kitchen? So I teach survey methods at UT Austin, and we realized, my co-teacher and I, that we had all students could upload files to the Canvas website. Now, anything on a .edu or a student LMS is under the ADA compliance umbrella. So it has to all be ADA compliant, including student-created content. If it serves an educational purpose and a student, let's say, is a presenter, they're presenting a project to the class on Zoom, and they have a slide deck that they want to upload to Canvas. Once that student takes that slide deck and uploads it, it becomes an educational material, and that has to be ADA compliant. So as a faculty member, you need to also do a little bit of teaching the teacher with your students about how to use PowerPoint accessibility features, Word accessibility features to make sure that the documents that students are uploading for other students to interact with are also ADA compliant. Really important to be aware of. And then trim the fat. So what I've been doing the last couple years at Texas State using Sakai or Trax, it was called Trax, but it was a Sakai learning software. I would just copy and paste my curriculum and my timeline year to year just to get the dates reorganized and shuffle up some assignments, but a lot of the content was copy and paste. Is there old content on your website that students have access to they shouldn't have access to? So one thing is go back through your entire file repository, all the old discussion posts, delete old threads that students have access to. If they uploaded a PDF to a discussion board, delete that discussion board if you don't need it anymore. The less content you have on the site, the less you have to be compliant with, essentially, if you can do the best you can. Day-to-day stuff then, as you are editing learning materials and creating new things for your students or for your colleagues, is defining your website's language that is included in the .edu website and on student learning environment and student learning portals like Canvas. So the website's language is really important, especially if you teach content to students who speak different languages or non-English languages. If you do create some Spanish language or Vietnamese or Tagalog language content on your student learning portal, unless you tag that website with a different language tag, those students may not be aware that there is diverse linguistic materials on that website. So basic ADA compliance tip is defining not only to be ADA compliant, because it is level A, lowest threshold, all websites have to have languages defined, but also alerting your students to the fact that there may be non-English content on here for you. Don't navigate away. If you say ES is the shorthand or the acronym for Spanish, if you have an EN and an ES tag, that'll tell a student, hey, there's English and Spanish content on this website, keep looking. That could be a huge access hurdle for students, especially those who are non-native English speakers. Using a very simple readable font, I use Verdana for almost everything I do, and it's the font in this PowerPoint. I won't explain it in depth right now too much, but I will in just a second, and I'll actually show you the differences between Verdana, Arial, and other fonts, and about how much more readable and accessible Verdana is compared to almost anything else. Strong color contrast, the example I gave with UNC Chapel Hill, that baby blue on white, not contrastive enough. I tend to use just very plain looking PowerPoints. Today you're getting white and dark blue font. It's very contrastive. People with low vision or vision impairments would have likely no problem reading all of these words. Adding alt text to every single picture and closed caption to every single video. That is baseline ADA compliance, and that includes pictures that you add into Word documents. So not just standalone images, but any picture that you're using for an educational purpose has to have a description with it, and I'll give you an example of that in a second. Hyperlinks need to have informative titles. So I went through one of my linguistics syllabi from a few years ago, and my instructor included 40 hyperlinks on a 7-page syllabus, and none of them had informative titles. So if I hovered my mouse, hypothetically, let's say I'm blind, I'm hovering my mouse on those hyperlinks, I don't get any description about what that link does and where I would go if I clicked on it. So all hyperlinks in learning materials, any handout you give, any Word document, PowerPoint, PDF, always has to have informative titles. And I'll show you an example of that in a second as well. Understanding heading sizes. Canvas has a nice feature that you can actually build modules and indent certain modules underneath each other. That actually automatically assigns heading sizes, and most assistive technologies can read those heading sizes and understand if I'm at heading 1, there might be a heading 2, so I should keep reading. But if you don't define heading sizes and it's all just text, a student might not know how information is organized, and they might not know to keep scrolling to find more at the bottom of the page. The worst thing you want to do, have a bunch of information, have your contact info, all the critical stuff at the bottom, and a student never scrolls down to the bottom to actually find that content. So you want to make sure to define your heading sizes. And Canvas, I know, does a pretty good job of that automatically. A distance technology that now is incredibly popular around the world that is built into a lot of learning management systems is Zoom. So Zoom actually was a byproduct of a Cisco or a WebEx software. So the Zoom CEO used to work for WebEx and actually created Zoom as a very user-friendly, intuitive, and free video conferencing software, which is why partially it's so popular now. Millions of users at this point. Now, Zoom is nice because it embeds into Canvas, which I will actually show you in a second. I'll pull up my Canvas website and log in and show you. It does embed into Blackboard. It's a little clunkier. Canvas is a little bit nicer. But with Zoom, you can schedule class meetings. And I know I was talking with Christine, a lot of y'all already use that. Zoom accessibility, though, Zoom published a self-audit of their ADA compliance. They said they were compliant, but closed captioning is not a feature of Zoom. As it's built and as you download it, you can add third-party applications and add-ons that can do live closed captioning, but it is not a feature in Zoom as of right now that I'm aware of. You can, however, there is an option to have the host type in closed captions. That is a feature that you can assign someone to be a host of your meeting and have them type along and caption as you're speaking. Or, like I said, you can integrate a third-party app, but it is not an automatic feature as of right now. I would think that would be coming very soon. There is then a link to integrating a third-party app into Zoom. It's actually fairly user-friendly to integrate that into Zoom. And that way you can speak over all of your meetings, you can record all your lectures, and then take that video file, knowing that it's closed captioned, it's ADA compliant, and then uploading that to your website. Panopto is a lesser used technology. I think it's a little more expensive, but it is really, really robust, and it was actually created with web accessibility in mind. So it has an automated video captioning and lots of accessibility features. It actually touts itself as being fully Section 504 and 508 compliant. So as you're creating content with Panopto, it will prompt you to add titles to videos and add descriptions and make sure you add closed captioning. And a really great feature of Panopto is you can close caption your entire lecture and then go back and edit that closed caption. One thing you can't do with PowerPoint that I'm doing right now is you can't just speak and have it subtitle the entire presentation and then go back and fix it. You can't do that in PowerPoint. You can do it in Panopto though. It's a really clever software. Not nearly as popular, and I think it's more expensive, but I wanted to make you aware of that. It also integrates into Canvas, which I can show you in a second as well. In terms of the website itself, so aside from kind of like student engagement in your website, fonts are incredibly important. I use Verdana, like I said, it's highly web accessible. It has feet on the letters, so it makes the font a little more readable. So illegal activity is frowned upon. That is in Verdana size 32 font. Exact same sentence in Arial size 32 font. Notice how the capital I and the lowercase L's in illegal all look the same. So that is not ADA compliant because students need to be able to distinguish letters from themselves. And also notice the spacing in between the letters in Verdana. Verdana is a little bit wider of a font. That tends to be a little more readable for folks with vision impairments. And then Hattenschweiler is kind of a throwaway decorative font that you should not use for learning materials. You should probably stick with Times New Roman and Verdana for every single handout and PowerPoint that you create. In terms of font size and color contrast, so here is a higher education website. Notice the very bottom toolbar or the footer, that light green font pinned against a dark green background. There's no way that font is contrastive enough for people with vision impairments. So making yourselves aware of that as you're building your Canvas site or your Blackboard site or whatever online learning materials you're building, make the font big enough. No one ever complained about a font being too big within reason, obviously. And then also the color contrast when you're building your syllabi, your PowerPoint slides, having a dark font on a light color background. Most acceptable is white background, black font. You know, a default Microsoft Word document in Times New Roman, you should be totally ADA compliant with that information. Writing ADA compliant syllabi, because technically, not technically, in some ways, the syllabi is the contract that you have with you and the student. So a student can refer back to that if you change a grading scale and don't tell the class and don't say in the syllabus that the grading scale is subject to change. And the syllabi is kind of a legal document in your classroom. When writing the syllabi, use Microsoft Word. So Word has a ton of accessibility features built in. If you drag and drop a picture into a Word document, it will prompt you to add alt text or informative text about that picture. It'll actually ask you to do that. It's very, very handy. Prioritize text. Don't add too many hyperlinks you don't need to. Don't add too many pictures you don't need to, because every single piece of information that you add, you have to make sure that's web compliant. Text and the screen reader is kind of natively web compliant and ADA compliant as long as you use a font that is large enough and readable. Pictures, though, with no metadata or a hyperlink with no metadata is not inherently ADA compliant. So text is always still preferable. Also, just as a reminder, using a very simple readable font, strong color contrast on both PowerPoints and Word documents, any assignment handouts, all that kind of stuff. And adding informative alt text to pictures. So every single picture that you add in a PowerPoint slide that you're going to upload or a Word document should have a description of what's going on in that picture, as long as that picture is serving an educational purpose. So if it's a descriptive or not descriptive, if it's a decorative picture like a logo, for instance. So when you land on the UT Austin webpage, you have the kind of shield. It says University of Texas at Austin. That is just decorative. That's not serving an educational purpose. You don't need to add alt text to that. But because I'm trying to explain something right now and I'm using it for an educational purpose, you have to add alt text to your pictures, kind of in that style. So I would describe that picture as a picture of two college students walking on campus. They are wearing backpacks and talking to each other. That would make that picture ADA compliant. Avoid lots of hyperlinks. The example I gave you earlier of the syllabus with 40 different hyperlinks in it, think about how much content do students really need and how much content will they actually interact with, and then do the math from there and decide how many hyperlinks, how many links to external pages you actually need to you need to make in a syllabus or a handout, something like that. And then informative alt text to hyperlinks. If you're going to add a hyperlink in your syllabus, which you might, if you're a writing teacher, you might hyperlink to the newest APA 7 requirements, or you might hyperlink to the bookstore to order textbooks, something like that. You should add alt text that describes what the link is if a student clicks on it. So I would say if you click this link, you will be directed to the Trellis Company research website, and that would render that hyperlink in a syllabus or in this PowerPoint presentation. It would make that ADA compliant. Writing ADA compliant learning materials now, so things you might want to upload to your website, to your Canvas or whatever. When creating files, use all the accessibility features built into the Office suite. Understanding now that Microsoft Office may not be free. I'm assuming a lot of y'all run on Office, and I know a lot of colleges and universities run on Office. The newest updates in 365, if you download the most recent software updates, you'll see a lot more accessibility features, and I've included links in this PowerPoint that will take you to documentation about how to use all of those accessibility features. Same with Adobe. Adobe was actually way ahead of Microsoft, and they added accessibility features years ago about how to check a PDF for ADA compliance. It'll actually scan pictures in a PDF and make sure that you have alt text in your pictures, alt text in your hyperlinks, your font is big enough, all that kind of stuff. It's a really robust check that is built into Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Reader as well. Using a simple readable font, strong color contrast, alt text pictures and hyperlinks. Again, this is a kind of a checklist as you're creating content. Did I do this? Have I done this? Have I done this? A lot of learning materials are shared, however. So you might have a copy of an article that a colleague forwarded to you that you want to use as a learning tool in your classroom. I would caution you against that, because anything you didn't make, then you will not know is ADA compliant or not. I tend to just home grow my own stuff and just make all of my own learning materials because I know they're ADA compliant. If it's a really good resource though, if it's a PDF, run it through Adobe. If it's a really good Word document, open up Word and see if all the alt text has been added to all the digital elements. A lot of resources too are linked to other websites. So if you include a project handout that links to CNN, or it links to the History Channel or something like that, because you're using that information for an educational purpose, it also has to be ADA compliant. So this kind of gray area was settled in court a few years ago because a student at Harvard had complained about a textbook, a PDF textbook, not having an accompanying voice file, and a student couldn't read the PDF because it was scanned. It was a scan, and that student won. And then they had to reevaluate the learning materials for that classroom. As I just said, scans are not ADA compliant in most cases. So if you have a really good short story or a really good newspaper clipping or something that you use in the classroom that's a scan, this is something that I had to do. I was an English teacher and I loved this story, but I only had a scan of it because it was in an anthology years and years ago. I took that 5-page story and I retyped it out in Word. Retyped it word for word because the scan was not going to be ADA compliant, and the screen reading technologies are not quite strong enough to pick up a blurry word or a word that wasn't quite scanned accurately and speak that back to a student accurately. We don't have the technology just yet. So I went back and typed it all out. Huge pain, but it was an important learning material, and it only took me about an hour or so. And then all videos have to be closed captioned. So like I said, and what I'm doing right now with PowerPoint, if I was recording this webinar or this presentation right now, technically my PowerPoint would be ADA compliant because I'm providing closed captions for the video. Are all of those captions accurate? As I've been reading, no, they are not accurate, but something is better than nothing for sure. So I will share with you a few web accessibility resources, and then I wanted to leave about 20 minutes, 15 minutes at the end for questions, 20 minutes, these last 20 minutes, I'll go through and demonstrate some things and show you on Canvas where some things are at, and then just go through some resources. And again, these are all gonna be free or very low cost. So the Department of Ed guidance on section 504 is right there. A lot of folks have never read much about disability, and we have a long and storied and kind of sordid history in this country of disability, but it's a really good read if you're curious. The WCAG Quick Reference Guide. This is of the screenshot I showed you earlier of all the different WCAG 2.0 standards. You can sort them by level A and level AA because that is the threshold that colleges and universities have to adhere to. So you don't have to adhere to every standard, but you have to adhere to most of them, and that link is provided right there. Windows accessibility resources. Every single Microsoft Office and Windows software has accessibility features now built in. I can actually dictate my emails now. So that this morning, when I woke up, I was just responding to emails, and every now and again, I'd click dictate, and I'd speak a sentence. And because it knows my voice really well, my emails are pretty close to 100% accurate with voice dictation, and that was recently built into Outlook. Most folks don't know that accessibility software is built into almost every computer ever made. So Mac users right now, if you want to kind of minimize your Zoom window on your computer, if you're on a computer, just minimize it, kind of move over to the side, and then hold Command and hit F5, and VoiceOver should pop up. So VoiceOver is an assistive technology that allows you to control the entire interactive internet computer experience with only your keyboard. You don't need to use your mouse at all. And it will read to you every single letter, every single word, every single sentence on any application. It's really, really powerful, and it's totally free. And Apple updates VoiceOver with every single operating system update. So VoiceOver always stays very robust. It's very up to date. It's an excellent software. And I've written a few papers actually just using VoiceOver as a way to audit websites for people. Windows users have the exact same ability to do that. So Windows users can hold the Windows button and then click Control and Enter. And that should launch Narrator, which is the Windows version of VoiceOver. It's the exact same thing. You can control all applications for the most part, and internet navigation, navigating Canvas, all with your keyboard. And if you're curious about some of the hurdles that your students might encounter, I would challenge you to blindfold yourself or something and simulate a disability if you don't have one. At least a vision one, and see how much navigation you can do with just your keyboard. You'd be surprised. I personally, when I was doing a project on applying to Texas colleges, out of 259 2- and 4-year schools in Texas, I couldn't apply to a single school using VoiceOver because I couldn't find the Apply Texas link on any single site. It was that non-compliant. So I would challenge you then, simulate some of the struggles that your students might be facing to give you a little bit of an idea of what they're up against. In other papers, I've also used TNON. TNON is a website accessibility checker. Essentially, you just copy and paste a hyperlink, you plug it into the system, and it'll scan all the lines of code and pick out where you're missing information. So are you missing alt text to a hyperlink or a picture? Did you not build a menu correctly? Are you not using CSS or cascading style sheets in a way that's intuitive to a user? All that kind of stuff. Way more than what calls for today, but it's a very low cost software, and TNON is kind of a leader in the online accessibility space. And I would encourage you to go at least get the free trial and see how you like it. The thing about TNON is you can export all the errors to a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. So if you're going through your website or some of your learning materials and you're not sure if things are ADA compliant, run it through Tnon, get the report, and if you can't fix something, at least you have documentation of what you need to fix. So when you go get help, you can get it fixed. And then A-Checker, bless the Canadians, they have a free version of Tnon. It is not as robust and it is not as user-friendly, but A-Checker will also run lots of the same accessibility audits for your website to give you an idea of what things you need to fix to make it a little bit more ADA compliant. Defining website language, again, that's one line of code. Almost anyone can do it. If you've ever run like a WordPress website, you can do it. Adobe accessibility is right there. That's all the documentation for how to use Adobe and all the accessibility features. I had a couple of teachers I was talking to last week, K-12 teachers, who the district had just bought Adobe Acrobat licenses for everyone in the district. They finally got into Adobe, and they had no idea that there was accessibility software built into Adobe, and they've been teaching for 10, 12 years and use PowerPoints and PDFs all the time, and they never check that for accessibility. So it's really powerful software. WebAIM is an organization that aims to increase web accessibility for folks with disabilities. They have a really good outline of fonts. I'm a huge font nerd, and they talk about how important font is because now students are going to have to interact with so much text in some ways that they may not have had to interact with before, either through face-to-face lectures or whatever. Producing content with really readable font is really important. And then Penn State is kind of the higher education leader in the accessibility space, partially because of their world campus or their global campus. They were a pretty early player in online education along with Purdue University. And Penn State has a really good website for accessibility. They have all the WCAG standards addressed in different news articles and topics like color contrast. You can actually test your website for color contrast as well through the Penn State site. It's pretty excellent. So those are all free resources that can get you a really, really good head start. And I see, we're hanging on to 32 people or 30 people, and we've had about that number since the very beginning. So if you've gotten through this presentation and you didn't know some things that you now know, you know more than almost anyone else may know about web accessibility. There have been times where I've gone to conferences and folks have never heard of it and have left sessions like these saying, I had no idea color contrast was so important. I had no idea alt text was necessary for pictures. I had no idea what metadata was. These kind of like really low level things, if you can embrace some of these practices, you will go a really long way for ADA compliance. And that's what's probably best for your students. So what I'm going to do right now is quickly stop my share, and then I'm going to reshare my, my Chrome browser. So give me just a second. I'm going to share my Chrome browser. Here we go. And now everybody should see, and I may have been logged out. Nope, I wasn't. Great. So I'm into Canvas, and I'm just going to kind of show you where some of the assistive technologies or the video technologies have been built in. And I know a lot of y'all probably already run on Canvas, but I just wanted to show you this anyway. It's both Zoom and Panopto. So Zoom was built into Canvas this semester, and we've been using Zoom to schedule meetings, to also upload cloud recordings. So if we ever wanted to record an entire session, if a student missed a class, we could record the entire lecture and then upload it here, which is kind of nice. It's also nice about Canvas is that when you schedule a meeting, it also gets integrated into the, or you can integrate it into the modules or the assignments. So as you have, under a learning module, if you have a PowerPoint and 2 PDFs to read, you can also link that Zoom meeting. So everyone knows exactly, like, here's module 3 for week 3, here's my learning materials, and here's where my class meets. It can all be very nicely organized. And I don't believe, I could be mistaken, but I don't believe that your institution needs to have a licensed version for large meetings and integrate into Canvas. So the way that Zoom works is it's free for up to 100 participants for up to 40 minutes, but then you get cut off and you have to restart the meeting. Now, if you want to keep class meetings to 30 minutes or 35 minutes, you could get away with a free subscription to Zoom and just make sure you don't go over time. But what Zoom does is it kicks you out after 40 minutes, and the original link that you have sometimes does not let all of your students back in. So I'm also not sure if Zoom and integrating with Canvas is a free feature. UT Austin bought the licensed version for faculty, so it was easily integratable into Canvas because of all the IT support. I'm not sure if your schools will have that. You may have to work with IT to get that integrated in there, but if you do have it, fantastic. Panopto is another new video platform. It's very, very, very new to the UT Austin space. There's only about 500 schools across the country who use Panopto. And if you think of, there's 6,700 Title IV schools in this country, not many use Panopto. But Panopto is basically a content creation software. And again, you can record your screen if you're going to do something like highlight some research process or go through an article and annotate something. You can record a new session. You can capture video. And like I said, they have that automatic live captioning feature. You can go back and edit those captions. You can upload a bunch of stuff. UT Austin does not have, I believe, the full version of Panopto. They have like a tiered version of it, but it does integrate just like Zoom does into the Canvas platform and allows you to create some content for online learning and to kind of build your online courses. So that is about all I think I have time to share in depth right now. We're already coming up on almost 12:50. So I will keep my screen shared just in case anyone wants me to navigate somewhere. But let me go down on the chat. Yeah, Christine.
I've been monitoring, and so let me just kind of feed you some of that so you don't have to scroll through it. First, you got lots of congratulations on your doctorate. So
thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Getting lots of positive thoughts.
Yes.
One person who was monitoring the automatic captioning and noticed that it could be really important for us to spell out acronyms when we're talking.
Yes.
Because that's where errors happen. So we noticed that with ADA and WCAG, that we were getting some errors there.
Mm-hmm.
But then we had 2 questions. And so the first one is, do you have any resources for accessible math notations for mathematics instructors? And the second is, have you used Grackle, and do you have any opinions on Grackle?
Yes, so I'll do the math notation one first. I don't have any resources for math notation, but what I've seen mathematics instructors do is have accompanying voice files for all of their handouts that include notation. So for instance, you can add a little audio clip next to the notation that speaks the notation through, and a student can be prompted to, once they get to the notation, say that there is an accompanying audio file they can play that would speak the notation to them. So depending on how much notation you use, I'm not sure if that's helpful, but I actually offhand don't know of a software that would caption notation. That's a good question. But you could add a voice file to a syllabus or to a handout, and that would make it ADA compliant then. Grackle integrates with Google, if I'm not mistaken. I think I had a professor 2 semesters ago use Grackle. I know it's freemium, so I think you have to pay a certain amount after you audit a certain number of documents. I haven't personally used it, but I know the professor who used it actually ended up preferring Microsoft afterward because Microsoft was a little bit better than Grackle was. But it's kind of an add-on for Google, and you can, I think, go through Google Docs and Google Slides and Sheets and kind of do ADA auditing in your Google Drive. And if you are a school who's a Google school and not a Microsoft school, I would explore Grackle, but I think Grackle has a software subscription. Not sure how much it is, but I have not personally used it. I've known someone who's used it, but they ended up moving over to Office because that was a little bit better. And then actually another question I'm seeing too is, are you able to edit the automatic captions in PowerPoint? No. So that is a live subtitling feature. And once you record it, you can't go back and edit that screen. And you know, one thing I should say, that if I was creating a video that was going to be like a lecture that would be posted, I would speak like this. And I would make sure to enunciate every syllable. That might help with the accuracy of the captioning. But that's the nice thing about Panopto, is you can go back on the back end and edit all the captions, but you can't do that in PowerPoint. That might be built in the future though, but a lot of folks didn't even know about the subtitling feature until recently. So
I have another question, and this is much more general accessibility based on your hardware and software. Because what we found is that as everyone's moved to remote instruction and remote work, there have been issues with accessing materials based on whether you have a Chromebook versus a PC versus a Mac. And especially when you get into things like online testing or proctoring and things like that. So have you found that there are any recommendations in terms of which systems our institutions should invest in for ourselves, but also for our students?
Oh gosh, hate to say this, and I don't work for either of these companies, but a Windows or an Apple laptop is the best. It has the best software. It's the most robust. Assigning, it hurts my heart a little bit when some colleges have gone to really, really cheap Chromebooks or tablets that don't have the accessibility software or the hardware built in to make learning materials really, really robust. So many students with disabilities also rely on a physical keyboard or a physical mouse. And if you're giving a student a tablet, it might be a piece of hardware that they can't even use with the assistive technology they have. The best is fully built out laptop, whether that's Windows or that's Apple or Mac, making sure you have the full operating system. Because with some of the accessibility software as well, like the live captioning, you've got to have a little bit of RAM, a little bit of hardware in your machine to actually process some of those functions. And tablets and Chromebooks sometimes don't have that. We won't name names, but a district I used to work for, we went to the COW model, which was the computers on wheels, and we would move those from classroom to classroom. And when I taught my blended sections, we couldn't use the COWs because the Chromebooks we had didn't have the software students needed. Half of the students who used any kind of assistive technology to manipulate a screen without using their hands, they couldn't use a Chromebook. Granted, this was 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Software might have changed and hardware might have changed by now, but I do know that Windows, Macintosh, laptops with voiceover narrator built in with 8 gigs of RAM or more, that'll be what students will most likely need to access all the same information.
Great, thank you. So for everyone who is still with us, please type in any questions that you have because we want to be sure that you get answers. He is a great resource and we're lucky to have him with us for 5 more minutes. And then also, Zach, if there's anything else you wanted to show us, we'd be glad to see it.
Yeah, so I'll let me pull up on my Chrome browser one other software I can use one other software I can share on my Chrome browser. So this is Tnon, and I don't work for Tnon. I get no commission from Tnon. I just like Tnon. So you do get a free trial with Tnon, and one thing that's nice is I don't know if it'll let me get too much further past this. Maybe it won't. Tnon is nice because you can plug and chug a hyperlink, and you can also upload like a PDF file if a PDF file is being hosted on your website. Tnon has a really good chat feature right down here. If you have a question or want to talk to someone, they're really, really supportive. They are using some of like the best, yeah, it's already popping up. They use some of the best chatbot features so you can get your questions answered really, really quickly. They kind of do institutional support for colleges and universities that don't have really robust IT departments. I know there are a couple of UT systems schools that use Tnon as their web accessibility team, essentially. It's cheaper for them to do so. And again, what's nice about Tnon is you get the report in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, so you don't have to be the expert. Just have your hyperlink of the content that you want to share with students, put that into Tnon. I want to say at last glance, it was 10 cents per web page to audit. And I think the free trial, I think you get 5 free ones before they start charging you. And you can buy them in batches and they never expire. Plug in the hyperlink, get that report. Anything you can fix in the columns, you can sort by the severity of the error and the compliance level. So only level A and level AA, which is really, really nice. Then anything you can't fix, you just send that report to your web development team and they can help you work through it. But I would just really highly suggest Tnon because it's a really excellent software.
Great, thank you. We did have another question that came up.
Sure.
Some of our institutions got scared off because of the Zoom bombings that were happening. And I know that Zoom has added some safety features now. Nonetheless, we have a question from one person who said, our institution has asked us not to use Zoom because it's been hacked. So we're asked to use WebEx instead. Any thoughts on that? Is WebEx just as accessible now?
Okay, so WebEx works and is just as accessible as Zoom, but we sometimes take students tech savvy for granted because they're always on their phones and they're kind of a tech native generation. I tried training some students on how to use GoToMeeting and WebEx, and it was a nightmare because it was not user-friendly. Zoom is much more intuitive and user-friendly. And if you only use the security features on Zoom, so create unique room numbers and then create passwords, and then change that password every single class and make sure when you send that email out to students, they have to enter the password to enter your room. And then also turn on the waiting room feature. So by turning on the waiting room, even if a student enters the password, you have to see their name and admit them to the room. After that, sharing a screen using the chat feature, the polling feature, a student sharing their screen, a student raising their hand, it's so much more intuitive and user-friendly than WebEx. WebEx was created for businesses and corporations, like adults who were regularly using technology. Zoom was created for kind of like the casual internet video user. And a lot of our students, even though they might have a cell phone glued to their hands, are not that tech savvy. And Zoom is a really low bar of access. So I would encourage you, log into Zoom. And actually, I wonder if I can show you where some of the features are. I don't know if I'm logged in right now or I'll have to sign in. Give me just a second. Because I have lots of different accounts.
Of course, everybody today used Zoom, and so they were in a waiting room. They got the password, so they saw some of that user end.
Yep. So when you go into your settings, and for meetings, you can scroll down. I mean, I allow telephone and computer audio. And people to join before me because I tend to only send my Zoom meetings out internally with Trellis. But you can require a password. You can also authenticate users, so unless they were on the original invite, they can't even join your room if they wanted to. And UT Austin went to this, so in our classroom settings, students can't use Gmails. They have to use utexas.edu emails. So it's another new safety feature that only authenticated people can use it, and then requiring a password. So if you have the waiting room on, you require a password, and you only have students log in with their .edu website or their email, you know, if they are crazy computer hackers, they're gonna find some way to hack you. But all those safety features, it's highly unlikely. So yeah, I would log into Zoom. And I know a lot of these features, unless you log into the website, you never see these. So don't just log into the app, actually go to zoom.us, go into your profile settings and tick some of these boxes, read some of these safety features, and you'll probably feel a lot better.
Thanks, Zach. And so it sounds like if you need to use WebEx, just understand that it's not intuitive, so you really need to support your students, and then also advocate for Zoom if you can, because they have improved their safety features. So with that, we are out of time for today's meeting. Thank you so much for all of you who joined us, and thank you, Zach, for sharing your time and expertise.
Absolutely.
this will be recorded and posted on our website, so it'll be available for you. And Zach, I know you're also going to make the PowerPoint itself available so that they can use those links.
Absolutely. Yep. I'll send my PowerPoint, and I'll also send Christine a bunch of articles and practitioner guides to how to publish web accessible stuff. So
wonderful. And with that, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next Monday.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.